You seem distant lately, Brenda, I remarked, trying to sound casual as I flipped through the pages of a book. My eyes kept darting between the words and Brenda, who was pacing in the kitchen. She was moving around like she had some urgent task at hand, though it was obvious she was just restless. Just work stress, Dave, she replied, her smile strained. She reached for a mug, then changed her mind and picked up a glass of water instead. Her voice carried an edge that hadn't been there before. You know how it is? Deadlines, meetings, the usual. I watched as she took a sip, her eyes never meeting mine. Yeah, I get that. I nodded slowly, setting the book aside. But it feels like more than that. You haven't been yourself lately. Brenda's grip on the glass tightened slightly, but she forced another smile. It's nothing really. Just a busy week, that's all. She turned away, opening the fridge and pretending to look for something inside. I stood up, walking over to the kitchen counter. Come on, Brenda. You're pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. If something's bothering you, we should talk about it. What do you want me to say, Dave? Her voice was sharp now, frustration bubbling to the surface. She slammed the fridge door shut, the bottles inside rattling from the force. I'm tired, okay? Work has been hell, and I just need some space to breathe. Her sudden outburst caught me off guard. Brenda was usually the calm one, always in control. All right, I said, holding up my hands in surrender. I didn't mean to push. I just want to make sure you're okay. I'm fine, she snapped and softened her tone. I'm sorry, Dave. I didn't mean to bite your head off. It's just, everything's been overwhelming lately. She rubbed her temples, closing her eyes for a moment. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she was carrying the weight of something unspoken. Why don't you take a break? I suggested, moving closer to her. We could get away for a weekend, leave the work stress behind. Just the two of us. Brenda opened her eyes and looked at me, her expression conflicted. That sounds nice, she admitted, her voice softening. But I can't. Not right now. There's too much going on at the office. I sighed, leaning against the counter. Okay, but if you change your mind, just let me know. I miss spending time with you, Brenda. She nodded, her gaze dropping to the floor. I miss it too, she whispered, but there was something in her tone that made my heart sink. The conversation ended there, and Brenda busied herself with cleaning up the already spotless kitchen. I stood there for a moment, watching her go through the motions, her mind clearly elsewhere. I wanted to reach out, to pull her into my arms and make everything right again, but something held me back. There was a wall between us now, one I couldn't quite see but could definitely feel. Later that night, as we got ready for bed, I noticed how Brenda avoided looking at me. She kept her eyes down, her movements mechanical as she slipped under the covers. I tried to initiate a conversation, but she responded with monosyllables, her mind clearly preoccupied. You're still thinking about work? I asked, lying down beside her. I reached out to touch her arm, but she flinched slightly before relaxing. Yeah, it's just a lot right now, she replied, turning on her side to face away from me. I just need to sleep, Dave. Can we talk in the morning? Sure, I murmured, though I knew we wouldn't. I watched the back of her head for a long time, listening to the sound of her breathing as it slowly evened out. I wanted to believe that it was just work stress, that everything would be fine once she got through this rough patch. But a small voice in the back of my mind wouldn't stop nagging at me, telling me something was wrong, something more than just work. The next day, as I was leaving for work, I noticed Brenda had left her phone on the kitchen counter. It was unusual. She was usually glued to it, even when she didn't need to be. I hesitated, then picked it up, telling myself I was just going to put it in her purse. But as I held it, the screen lit up with a notification. A message. I couldn't see the full name, just the initial M. My heart pounded as I stared at the screen, the urge to swipe and read overwhelming. But before I could make a decision, I heard Brenda coming down the stairs. I quickly put the phone back on the counter and grabbed my keys. She entered the kitchen, her hair still damp from the shower, and smiled at me, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in days. Heading out early? She asked, picking up her phone without even glancing at it. Yeah, I replied, trying to keep my tone light. Got a meeting first thing? What about you? Any big cases today? She shrugged, slipping the phone into her purse. Nothing too crazy. Just the usual. I'll probably be home late again. All right. Have a good day, Brenda, I said, leaning in to kiss her cheek. She turned slightly, letting me kiss her, but the moment felt awkward, forced. You too, Dave, she replied before heading out the door. As I drove to work, my mind was racing. The message, the way she'd been acting, the way she'd avoided any real conversation. All of it was adding up to something I didn't want to face. I tried to focus on the road, on the day ahead, but the nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. The day dragged on, my concentration shot. By the time I got home, it was late, and the house was dark. Brenda wasn't home yet, as she'd said, but it felt different, emptier than usual. I poured myself a drink and sat down on the couch, staring at the clock as the minutes ticked by. When Brenda finally walked in, it was past midnight. She looked exhausted, her makeup smudged, her hair slightly disheveled. Long day? I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. Yeah, she sighed, kicking off her shoes and heading straight for the bedroom. I'm beat. I'm just going to crash. I watched her go, my drink untouched. Something was definitely wrong, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. I set down the glass and followed her to the bedroom, determined to get some answers. Brenda, I called as she pulled off her clothes, leaving them in a heap on the floor. We need to talk. She paused, her back to me, then turned around slowly. What is it, Dave? She asked, her voice tired, almost defeated. I don't know what's going on with you, but it's not just work. You're distant. You're avoiding me, and I can't keep pretending everything is okay. She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes searching mine. Then she sighed, running a hand through her hair. Dave, I'm going through something right now, and I need space. It's not about you. I just need to figure some things out. What things? I pressed, my heart pounding. Is there someone else? She stared at me, her face unreadable. No, she said finally, but there was something in her voice that didn't convince me. Just give me time, okay? I wanted to believe her, to trust that she was telling the truth. But as I watched her climb into bed and turn away from me, that nagging doubt only grew stronger. Something was off, and I was afraid of what I might find if I dug deeper. But I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. Something had to give. The days following my conversation with Brenda were filled with a sense of unease that gnawed at me constantly. She moved through the house with an air of normalcy, but I noticed the subtle changes. The way she avoided my gaze, the extra time she spent on her phone, and the late-night showers that seemed to last longer than usual. I began to watch her more closely, piecing together the fragments of her behavior that I had previously brushed aside. She was careful, but I was patient, waiting for the right moment to uncover whatever it was she was hiding. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was piling up in my mind, leading me to a conclusion I wasn't ready to face. One evening, Brenda left for what she claimed was a work dinner. She had thrown on a sleek dress, applied her makeup with meticulous care, and left with a quick peck on my cheek that felt more like a routine obligation than an affectionate gesture. I watched her go, the door closing behind her with a finality that sent a chill down my spine. As I sat in the living room, pretending to read a book, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. The number was unfamiliar, but the caller ID displayed Hotel Montage Palmetto Bluff. My heart skipped a beat. Why would a hotel be calling me? I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. Hello? Is this Mr. David Carter? The voice on the other end was calm, professional, but there was an underlying urgency that made me sit up straighter. Yes, this is David Carter. Who's this? I replied, frowning as I turned down the TV. I'm the manager of the Hotel Montage Palmetto Bluff, the man began, his tone growing more cautious. I'm calling because we've had an unusual situation here involving your wife. I felt the blood drain from my face. What do you mean? Is she okay? My mind raced, imagining all sorts of scenarios, none of them good. She's physically fine, sir, the manager assured me quickly, though his voice wavered slightly. But we found her in a compromising position with another man in one of our penthouse suites. They're stuck. Stuck? How the hell are they stuck? My voice rose, confusion mingling with the anger that was bubbling up inside me. There was a pause, and when the manager spoke again, his tone was hushed, as if he was afraid of how I might react. They're chained together, sir. Handcuffed, actually. We believe it was consensual, but They can't seem to unlock themselves. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My mind was reeling, trying to process what I was hearing. Who's the man? I finally managed to ask, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Another long pause, and then the manager's voice came through the line, hesitant and almost apologetic. We checked his ID. I think it's your brother, Mr. Carter. The phone nearly slipped from my grasp as the full weight of the situation hit me. My brother? My own flesh and blood? Rage surged through me, hot and blinding. I had been suspicious of Brenda, but this was beyond anything I could have imagined. My mind went numb for a split second as the reality of what I had just heard sank in. Then, the shock gave way to a surge of anger so powerful that I had to bite down on my lip to keep from roaring. My brother, my wife, together. The thought alone was enough to send me over the edge. I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said, my voice eerily calm despite the storm brewing inside me. Don't let them leave. I hung up without waiting for a response, the phone trembling in my hand. My thoughts were a chaotic mess, jumping from disbelief to fury to a dark, vengeful satisfaction. They thought they could betray me? Humiliate me? They had no idea what was coming. I snatched my keys off the counter and stormed out of the house, barely registering the slam of the door behind me. The drive to the Hotel Montage Palmetto Bluff was a blur. My mind raced, replaying every interaction I'd had with Brenda and my brother over the past few months. How long had this been going on? How could I have been so blind? As I neared the Hotel Montage Palmetto Bluff, my heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I didn't know what I would do when I saw them, but I knew I wanted them to suffer. They had already stripped me of my dignity. Now it was their turn. When I arrived at the hotel, I parked haphazardly and practically ran to the front desk. The manager, a middle-aged man with a nervous expression, was waiting for me. He didn't need to ask who I was. His face pale and nervous. He gestured toward the elevator, and I followed, the silence between us heavy with tension. Mr. Carter, thank you for coming so quickly, he said, his voice low as if he were trying to keep the situation discreet. If you'll follow me, I'll take you to the suite. I nodded curtly, following him to the elevator. The elevator ride was agonizingly slow. As the numbers ticked up, I felt the rage simmering beneath the surface, threatening to boil over. The manager stole a glance at me, his brow furrowed with concern. Mr. Carter, he began hesitantly. Are you sure you want to do this? Sometimes it's better to open the door. I cut him off, my tone brooking no argument. The elevator doors opened, and we stepped out onto the plush carpeted floor of the penthouse suite. The manager hesitated, his hand on the doorknob, before finally pushing it open. The door swung open slowly, revealing the scene inside. Brenda and Mark were on the bed, fully naked, their wrists bound together by steel chains. The look of sheer terror on Brenda's face when she saw me standing in the doorway was priceless. Oh shit, this is so embarrassing. I told him not to satisfy his fantasy in this way. She gasped, instinctively grabbing the sheets to cover herself, as if that could undo what I was seeing. Dave, I can explain. I smirked and interrupted. Explain, my voice heavy with sarcasm. I stepped into the room, my eyes locking onto hers. Please go ahead, Brenda. I'd love to hear what excuse you've got for this. Mark, usually so smug and self-assured, looked like a cornered animal. He couldn't meet my gaze, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape that wasn't there. Dave, I'm sorry, man. It's not what it looks like. Oh, it's exactly what it looks like, I spat, pulling my phone from my pocket. With a flick of my thumb, I opened the camera and started recording, the lens capturing their guilty faces in crisp detail. Smile for the camera. Brenda's face drained of all color as the reality of what I was doing hit her. Dave, no. Please don't do this. Her voice cracked, and she reached out with her free hand, her fingers trembling. But her pleas only fueled the fire inside me. I had trusted her, loved her, built a life with her, and she had thrown it all away for this. I ignored her, my focus shifting to the phone as I scrolled through my contacts. First, I dialed our parents. They deserved to know what kind of people their children had become. The phone rang twice before my mother's voice came on the line, cheerful and unsuspecting. "Hi, Dave. How are you?" "Mom," I said, my voice cold as ice. "I'm sending you a location. I want you guys to come see what Brenda and Mark have been up to." "What are you talking about, Dave?" she asked, confusion evident in her tone. "Just come, Mom," I replied curtly, ending the call before she could ask any more questions. My hand shook with a mix of adrenaline and satisfaction as I watched the little progress bar fill up on the screen. Next, I called Mark's wife, Jessica. Then everyone to come and see this drama. "They will be soon here." I stood there, the phone heavy in my hand, the room eerily quiet save for the muffled sobs coming from Brenda. She had curled up on the bed, clutching the sheets to her chest, her shoulders shaking with each ragged breath. "Dave," she whimpered, her voice barely audible, "please don't ruin us like this. We made a mistake, but we can fix it. We can work through this." Her words were like poison, dripping with desperation, but they did nothing to sway me. I stared at her, at the woman I had once loved, and felt nothing but a cold, hollow emptiness. "You already ruined everything," I said quietly, my voice devoid of emotion. "This is just the consequence." Mark tried to speak, but I silenced him with a glare so fierce that he immediately shrank back. I wasn't interested in anything he had to say. He had crossed the line, and there was no coming back from that. "You both made your choices," I continued, stepping back toward the door. "Now you get to live with them." I turned without another word and walked out, leaving them to their misery. As I exited the suite, the manager stood there, awkwardly avoiding my gaze. I didn't care. I didn't care about anything anymore. The only thing that mattered was that they knew, everyone knew, what they had done. And that was just the beginning. The room was a ticking bomb of tension as we waited. Brenda and Mark, still chained together, were a pitiful sight on the bed. They couldn't even look at me, their eyes glued to the floor in shame. I stood by the window, my back turned to them, staring out at the sprawling city lights. My heart pounded, but it wasn't from fear or sadness. It was from the dark thrill of what I was about to do. The knock on the door broke the silence like a hammer shattering glass. I turned slowly, my face unreadable, and muttered under my breath, "Showtime." I crossed the room with deliberate steps, each one echoing in the tense silence. When I opened the door, I was met by the confused and concerned faces of our parents, Mark's wife, Jessica, and our 2 teenage children. They had no idea what they were about to walk into. "Dave, what's going on?" my father asked, his brows furrowed in confusion. Without a word, I stepped aside, revealing the scene inside. The collective gasp that filled the hallway was like music to my ears. My mother's hand shot up to cover her mouth, Jessica's face drained of color, and my children, my poor children, stood there, frozen in shock, unable to process what they were seeing. "This," I said, my voice calm and steady, "is what happens when you trust the wrong people. When you think your wife and brother would never betray you. When you believe in lies." Brenda's eyes welled up with tears, her sobs breaking through the silence. She clutched the sheets around her, desperate to cover herself. "Please, Dave, don't do this in front of the kids." I met her desperate gaze with cold indifference. "You should have thought about that before you decided to fulfill his fantasies," I replied, my voice cutting through her sobs like a knife. "You should have thought about what it would do to our family." Jessica stepped forward, her face a mix of rage and heartbreak. "How could you, Mark?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "How could you do this to me? To us?" Mark, ever the coward, couldn't meet her gaze. "I'm sorry, Jessica," he mumbled barely above a whisper. "It was a mistake, a stupid mistake. I never meant to hurt you." Jessica recoiled, as if his words were a physical blow. "A mistake," she repeated, her voice rising in anger. "A mistake is forgetting to take out the trash, not betraying your wife and brother in the worst way possible." The tension in the room was unbearable, every word like a fresh wound. My parents stood in stunned silence, their minds struggling to process the scene before them. My father, always the voice of reason, finally spoke, his voice heavy with concern. "Dave, son, are you sure this is the way to handle this?" I looked him in the eye, my resolve unwavering. "Dad, they made their choices. Now, they have to face the consequences. They didn't think about the damage they were doing when they decided to do this. So why should I protect them now? My mother, her voice trembling with emotion, turned to Brenda. How could you, Brenda? After everything Dave has done for you, for our family? Brenda broke down, her tears flowing freely now. I'm sorry. I know I messed up. I know I hurt everyone, but I never wanted this to happen. I don't know why I did it. Her desperate confession hung in the air, but it did nothing to soften the fury that had taken hold of me. You don't know why? I repeated, my voice laced with bitterness. Maybe because you're selfish. Maybe because you're a coward who couldn't face your problems head on. Or maybe because you thought you'd never get caught. Brenda looked up at me, her face a picture of misery. Dave, please, I love you. I know it doesn't seem like it now, but I do. Can't we just... No. I cut her off, my voice as cold as the steel chains binding them. There's no way anymore, Brenda. You made sure of that. Jessica's fury had reached its peak. She was trembling with rage as she addressed Mark. I want a divorce, Mark, she said, her voice flat and emotionless. And I'm taking the kids. You don't deserve to be in their lives after this. Mark's face crumpled as he realized the full extent of what he had lost. Jessica, please don't do this. We can fix this. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. But Jessica was beyond any hope of reconciliation. There's nothing to fix, Mark. You've destroyed everything. There's no coming back from this. The room was filled with a suffocating silence as Mark's words hung in the air, unanswered. His once confident demeanor was now replaced with a hollow, defeated shell of a man. He had gambled everything on a moment of weakness and lost it all. My parents exchanged a look, clearly shaken by what they had just witnessed. My mother, her voice gentle but firm, spoke up. Dave will take the kids home. They don't need to see any more of this. I nodded, grateful for their intervention. Thank you, Mom. Please take care of them. My children, still in shock, were gently led out of the room by my parents. As I watched them go, my heart ached with the knowledge that their innocence had been shattered. This moment would leave scars, but I hoped it would also make them stronger. They needed to understand the consequences of deceit, even if it was painful. With the children gone, the room felt even colder, the silence more oppressive. There was nothing left to say, nothing that could undo the damage that had been done. I turned to Brenda, my voice steady as I delivered my final blow. I'm leaving, Brenda. I'll send someone to collect my things. Don't try to contact me. It's over. Brenda's face crumpled, her tears flowing anew as she pleaded with me. Please, Dave, don't go. I'll do anything to fix this. I'll change, I swear. But her pleas fell on deaf ears. You've already made your choices, I replied, my tone final. Now you'll have to live with them. I turned to leave, but before I reached the door, I paused and looked back one last time. And Brenda, when you look back on this, just remember, you did this to yourself. As I walked out of the suite, Brenda's sobs echoed in my ears, a painful reminder of the life I was leaving behind. But I didn't look back. I couldn't afford to. I had to keep moving forward. The elevator ride down was eerily quiet. I stared at my reflection in the mirrored walls, barely recognizing the man staring back at me. The adrenaline that had fueled me throughout the confrontation was wearing off, leaving behind a hollow emptiness. I had done what I came to do, exposed their betrayal, made them face the consequences. But the victory felt hollow. When the elevator doors opened, the cool night air hit my face, a stark contrast to the suffocating tension of the penthouse. I stepped out into the lobby, my steps slow and deliberate as I made my way toward the exit. The city outside was alive with lights and sounds, oblivious to the chaos that had just unfolded above. As I walked out of the hotel, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. The storm had passed, and now all that was left was to pick up the pieces and move on. The life I had known was over, but that didn't mean my life was over. There was still a future waiting for me, one that I would have to build from scratch. The night was cool and crisp as I walked down the street, the city lights guiding my way. I had no idea where I was going, but I didn't care. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. Free from the lies, the betrayal, the weight of the past. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to walk, and that was all that mattered. And so, with each step, I left the wreckage of my old life behind, ready to face whatever came next. Days turned into weeks, and the aftermath of that night spread through all our lives like a shockwave. Brenda moved out, packing her things in silence. She didn't say much, just the occasional nod or brief apology as she took one last look at the house. The home we had built together, once filled with warmth and laughter, now echoed with emptiness. Every corner held memories that were now tainted, and I couldn't escape them. Mark, too, faced the consequences of his betrayal. Jessica wasted no time. The divorce papers came swiftly, delivered with cold finality. Mark moved into a small, bare apartment on the outskirts of town. His new life was a far cry from the one he had destroyed. He called me once, his voice small and broken, asking if we could talk. I hung up without a word. There was nothing left to say. I threw myself into work, the office becoming my refuge. I stayed late most nights, drowning in tasks that kept my mind from drifting to the silence that awaited me at home. But no matter how busy I kept myself, the nights were still the hardest. The house, now stripped of Brenda's presence, felt like a tomb. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, the silence pressing down on me like a weight. Memories played on a loop in my mind, each one more painful than the last. The kids were struggling too. They didn't understand why their mother had done what she did, why their uncle, who had always been like a second father, had betrayed us all. At first, they were angry at Brenda, at Mark, at me for showing them the truth. But gradually, the anger gave way to sadness, and we began to talk. It wasn't easy, but those conversations were the first steps toward healing. We were rebuilding, one piece at a time. Several months after everything had fallen apart, I found myself in a quiet park, sitting alone on a bench. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the grass. I watched as the sky turned shades of orange and pink, the world around me slowly fading into dusk. For the first time in a long while, I let myself think about everything that had happened. Was I still angry? A part of me was, but more than anything, I was tired of holding on to the bitterness, the rage. It had consumed me for so long, and I realized that it was time to let it go. Not for their sake, but for mine. I couldn't rebuild my life if I was still clinging to the ruins of the past. As I sat there, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I made a promise to myself. I would move forward. I would let go of the anger, the pain. It wouldn't be easy, but it was the only way to truly heal. I knew that now. Life was too short to be consumed by what had already passed, and I refused to let the mistakes of others dictate my future.